Welcome to the Choral Connection, a series of interviews with musicians with whom Maestro Harold Rosenbaum has collaborated over his 47-year international conducting career. We hope you are inspired by their artistry and the stories they have to tell. For more about the series, please visit www.haroldrosenbaum.com.
Greetings, everybody. My guest today is my really good friend, Robert Spano, who's an American conductor and pianist. Since 2001, he has been music director of the Atlanta Symphony Orchestra. Prior to that, he served as music director of the Brooklyn Philharmonic from 1996 to 2004. Currently, he is the music director of the Aspen Music Festival and School. Maestro Spano has gained national and international prominence in recent years, appearing with major orchestras and opera companies throughout the United States and Europe, including the Cleveland Orchestra, Philadelphia Orchestra, New York Philharmonic, Los Angeles Philharmonic, Santa Fe, Boston, Chicago Symphonies, the BBC Symphony, Royal Concertgebouw Orchestra, Covent Garden, and more. He is regarded as an advocate of contemporary composers and has earned a reputation for ambitious and adventurous orchestral programming and presentation. In addition to raising his profile with, for example, appearances on The Late Show with David Letterman, Maestro Spano, we'll talk about that in a moment. Maestro Spano has made several prominent recordings with the Atlanta Symphony Orchestra, which have garnered 6 Grammy Awards. I have had the distinct pleasure of training my New York virtuoso singers for Bob 8 times at the Brooklyn Academy of Music and at Carnegie Hall. We did the finale of Beethoven's Ninth. It was actually a reduced, compressed finale on David Letterman's Late Show. The premiere of Nixon in China, I believe they were premieres, Bob, you can comment, of John Adams' Nixon in China, and The Death of Klinghoffer. And Aina Damar by Osvaldo Golijov, among other great concerts. So welcome, and have I gotten anything wrong yet?
No, but it's just great to see you, Harold.
Thank you. Yeah, I worked, before you came on board with the Brooklyn Philharmonic, I worked with, Michael Christie and Grant Llewellyn, and literally about 22 or 23 times with Lucas Force.
Uh-huh.
That was before I had my professional choir. So they hired us to hire my Canticum Novum singers, and we did concert after concert.
Well, Lucas was with the orchestra for what, 20 years?
Something like that, yeah.
I think so.
And what a fabulous man. I remember going to his apartment in Manhattan and looking through music. Very nice man. Can we tell the story of the David Letterman show appearance first? I mean, do you remember you had to conduct it twice?
I do.
Do you remember the circumstance, what happened, why we had to do it twice?
No, I don't.
Okay, great. So I'll tell a very quick story. After he introduced you and we did it, I mean, I didn't do it. I just trained the singers. I was in the audience. I watched you conduct it, and then somebody went over, I think it was the contractor of the orchestra, whispered something in David Letterman's ear, and he shouted out an expletive. And it turned out that he introduced the orchestra before the orchestra had a chance to tune. And I believe it's union regulations that they can't perform without tuning.
I forgot about that completely.
So you did it twice. And then I went backstage. Somehow they allowed me backstage. Nobody was there to stop me. I walked right past Darth Vader, James Earl Jones, who was next. He was waiting in the wings to go on stage. But that was, what was your recollection of that experience on the show?
Well, my biggest memories are how cold the set was.
Yeah.
And I had to take a private plane because I was in Atlanta too. So that was the first time I ever flew in a private plane. And of course, then you're spoiled for life and you can't do it again. And the other memory is that we had it cut down to what, 1.5 minutes or less even.
Yeah. It's on YouTube, by the way.
Oh, it's still there?
Yeah.
We haven't been censored?
No, but it was cut down dramatically. From whatever it is, 10 minutes to 12
Because I
minutes.
think relative to Beethoven's Ninth, we were misinformation.
Yeah, we were what?
Misinformation.
Right, of course. But I did look up subsequently. I looked up online why he keeps the theater cold. I think he keeps it at 48 degrees. It's to keep the audience alert.
Huh,
Generally speaking, I mean, not just for our performance.
how strange.
Yeah, very strange. And speaking of Lucas for a minute, your story about a private plane, I remember doing a rehearsal with him in a studio on 9th Avenue and 43rd Street. A rehearsal that ended at 6 p.m. on a Friday, and he ran out of the building. And I said, Lucas, why are you running? He says, I have a rehearsal in Detroit at 8 o'clock. So
Oh,
I don't know how he got there, but, or maybe it was Pittsburgh, but it was, anyway, funny. Let me first ask you, how does such an incredibly nice guy like you get what he wants from your performers? I mean, doesn't the conductor have to be somewhat dictatorial, brash, and fear-inducing? And before you answer, let me put my 2 cents in. It's one thing being a nice guy. It's quite another to be both so kind and incredibly competent and collegial that your performers are dying to please you and doing their very best at all times to bring your ideas to fruition. I have been in awe of your manner of approach from the moment I started working with you. Now it's your turn to speak.
oh, Harold, that's too kind. And there is this idea that the orchestra is a kind of human keyboard that the conductor plays. And certainly the stereotype, the Toscanini stereotype of dictatorial methods is around. But in fact, even historically, there were conductors who didn't work that way at all. Right away, I think of Metropolis, for example, or Bruno Walter. They had a very different attitude. And I think ultimately what I'm interested in from an orchestra is that everyone is an active creative participant in the process, because really, I think, and I know you work this way too, you want the most creative input from the people you're working with as can be put into the mix. And I think that there's a lot to be said for inviting people to bring their best rather than insisting that someone do their best. I'm more comfortable that way. I do think a young conductor was asking me the other day how to find a way to work with an orchestra in terms of that kind of thing, attitude and method and all that kind of stuff. And I said, well, just look around. There are as many ways to do that as there are conductors. And I think it's very hard for an aspiring conductor, I know it was for me, to find out what works best for you. And you kind of have to try things on, and you see people behave in certain ways or try certain methods, and you kind of have to take them and try them and see what really works for you, because we're not all the same.
Right. But, the larger the ensemble, the more voices there are who might want to have input. So it gets tough if you have a lot of people who.
And I love doing huge circus-sized works, Mahler 8 and so on. I mean, I just love the grandeur of those kinds of spectacle events that are still full of subtlety and refinement. And you're right, there's only so much. We were invented for a reason. We have to get the ship going in one direction. In those situations, I find I really appreciate the hierarchy of an orchestra, or when you're involved, or your counterparts of that hierarchy. I know that my captains and my generals are in certain key positions that then it's a feeder system to guiding the whole group.
Right, that's great. I have worried about your level of intensity during rehearsals and during breaks in rehearsals and during performances, but I haven't seen you bursting at the seams yet. what do you do consciously, if anything, to keep your energy going, or for that matter, in check? And how do you relax when you have time to do so?
Oh, I know that a lot of people have said to me, you probably don't know how to relax. And it's true. I like work, and I like working at a level of intensity, but I feel equally good at relaxing. And generally what I like is to binge watch something.
Mm-hmm.
For years, Chris Theophanides, the wonderful composer and good friend of mine, has come to my mountain house. We don't know what we're going to do from now on, but he comes once a year and we watch a whole season of Game of Thrones in 2 days. So we have to find the next investment.
That's great. But literally, when I see you rehearsing, it's just so intense, and it's just wonderfully intense. But yeah, good. Okay, you answered my question. Um, how and when do you find the time to study the music you are scheduled to conduct, especially world premieres and complex contemporary music?
I could ask you the same thing, Harold. I know you do so much repertoire too. It's a challenge for those of us who decide to do that, I think.
Yeah.
Not everybody does. Many people decide they're going to focus, and that can have great results. But I love the exploration, the endless exploration. And the only thing I've learned how to do over the years when I'm able to really achieve it is be ahead of the game to the extent that I can. I mean, sometimes you're getting a score for a world premiere very late, which means everything else that's on your plate has to be ready.
Right.
Because you're going to have to put all your energy into that when you finally get the score. So I try and work ahead. I try and think, okay, in a year I'm doing X, so I should start working on it now.
Right.
And I find if I work ahead in that way, things roll around in my, certainly in my unconscious mind, but even in the low levels of my conscious mind, that music starts to live in me. And so coming back to it a few times before it happens, I find that it's less scary doing something for the first time. But there's no avoiding the things you have to learn at the last minute, which is why I try and keep on top of things on the calendar ahead of the game.
Right.
Sometimes I get stuck and I'm just cramming for everything. And the only solution I've ever come up with for that is get up earlier.
Okay. Well, it's obviously worked for you.
I remember for years, especially, there was so much music I was doing for the first time when I was beginning my work as a conductor and traveling all the time. I remember I had to get up at 5 every morning just to be studying what I was going to do the following week. I was always trying to stay on top of things. And that gets better over time because you do actually start to repeat some pieces.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I know that, composers like Thea Musgrave and Augusta Reed Thomas, they get up at 4 or 5 in the morning to compose. It's the best time of the day. Now, you mentioned before you became a conductor. Now, I know you were, forgive me if I'm wrong, you studied at Oberlin, where you also are on the faculty. You studied there?
I did. I went to Oberlin as a composition major, but I ended up with a piano degree. Right.
And you won the piano competition as a student, but 1 year. But then, and maybe I misread this somewhere. Didn't you also win the competition on a different instrument a different year?
No, that's the stuff of legend that isn't true.
Okay. Darn internet.
Because I've been at Oberlin for so long. I was there for 5 years as a student because it took me forever to get my undergrad degree. And then I came back on the faculty 5 years later, and I've been 5 years later. And then I've stayed on the faculty ever since, even though I'm not always there every year. And so I feel like I'm part of the building there.
Soprano and former colleague of mine at the University at Buffalo, Tony Arnold, told me that she had studied conducting with you at Oberlin. You probably have had so many students you can't remember them all.
I remember Tony vividly.
Okay.
Because not so many years ago, we did a recital together.
Nice.
At Oberlin. We did all new music. I can't remember everything we did, and it all wasn't terribly new. I know we did the Poème Promis of Messiaen. We did Nussen's, what is the name of that set of songs?
I
I'm
don't know.
blanking on the name of that set of songs. And we did some Ligeti, and we did some Kurtag. So it was a wonderful program. It was hard. It was very difficult.
Did you do that? What's that name of the Ligeti piece that's really really tough for soprano?
No, no, I know what you're talking about. We didn't go that far with the Ligeti.
Okay. He told me that one of the things you had your students doing was had them reading, four open score, 4 different clefs: soprano, alto, tenor, and bass clefs, open score.
When I was teaching, I made my student, well, I did that. And I guess the things that helped us, we tend to teach. And
Right.
so I actually benefited so much from practicing Bach chorales in the original clefs that I always had my students doing that. And I benefited so much. And so I always ask them to sing one voice and play 3. And if you can't do that, then you work your way up, sing one voice and play 1, or sing one voice.
Right.
Or play 1, but until you can go down that sing other 3, sing the next one, other 3, sing the tenor, other 3. And that, I know what that does to the mind, because I know what it did for me, to the mind and the ear.
So, and can you describe what it does to the mind and to the ear?
Well, I think part of the big challenge for any conductor is to have a contrapuntal brain, because there's always so many things you have to pay attention to, not just in your listening. Already, that's a huge challenge, or in studying the score, but then also in the sense of running the rehearsal, taking care of people's emotional needs, staying in touch with the spiritual essence of the piece you're conducting. I mean, there's a lot to do. So you have to be working contrapuntally, and by playing and singing and reading the clefs and stretching the mind, it just produces a different capacity of attention.
And along those lines, I tell my conducting students that who tend to conduct the patterns like beginning students, but not the music, and they don't focus on the lines, that they too have to have contrapuntal minds, because you have to focus on what's happening at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And it can, I think that exercise can help train one's capacity to do that in a kind of fundamental way that then you apply as needed.
Right. I want to ask you 1 or 2 more things, and I know you're pressed for time. Do most major orchestras have similar sounds these days? In the olden days, I think many orchestras had their own unique sound. Is that still true these days, or is it more homogeneous?
Well, I've heard a lot of people say they believe we've lost the personalities of the great orchestras of the recent past. That hasn't been my experience. And when I conduct them or hear them, and now there are so many more great orchestras than there were in the past. And I find every orchestra to be as distinct as the individuals that compose that orchestra. There's and it may not be as convenient a classification to say, oh, Philadelphia Orchestra string sound used to be so warm. Well, it still is. Or Cleveland Orchestra used to be so cleanly, clean performances. Well, they still are. I don't think, or Boston used to be called the Orchestra of Aristocrats. Oh no, it was the other way around, the aristocrat of orchestras.
Right.
But they are. So I don't experience this loss. And in fact, I think it's more that we have more great orchestras now, because the quality of playing in so many cities around the country is just extraordinarily high.
That's great. That's so great. I'll never forget the fun we had working together, or the time years after we stopped, when we encountered each other on the street near Carnegie Hall, and you were genuinely interested in what I had been doing. You were truly one of a kind. Good luck with all your adventures, Bob. Do you have anything else to add, or before I let you go?
No, only to say thank you for the time, and just how wonderful it is to see you. And I hope you keep finding your way through this just incredibly challenging journey through a strange world at the moment.
Yes, I'm working on it. When I resume conducting, I have a 2-year project where I'm conducting every choral movement of every Bach cantata.
Oh, fantastic.
I just have to do it. One has to do these things.
Oh, that's fantastic.
And then I'm going back to contemporary music, which I love also.
Oh, that's great.
Great to see you.
Great to see you, Harold.
Okay. Bye.
All the best.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.